So you think you can tell heaven from hell, blue skies from pain. Can you tell a green field with a cold rain? Smile from the veil. Do you think you can tell? Did they get you to trade your heroes for gold? Hot as the trees, hot as the cool breeze.
What up, David?
What up? Hey, Darius, that was fun.
Oh, man, welcome. Welcome to the show.
One of the greatest depressing songs of all time.
I love that song. It's like
Me too.
It's such a beautiful song. Guys, welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. And man, do we have a special guest. My friend, David Osborn, is in the house. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Darius.
Oh, man, it's so good to have you here. I mean, I've been trying to get you on the show. It finally made it happen. And here we are. We're going to chalk it up and have lots of learnings for all the entrepreneurs and business people out there. But man, I don't know if you know this, but the Greatness Machine, it's about two things, right? It's about people who are living their passions, and those who are creating greatness in the world. And I've gotten the honor of getting to hang out with you. And man, you are chock full of both passion and greatness. So it's so good to have you here.
Hey, it's great to be with you. I've been blessed more than I deserve, and I'm still striving for just a little bit more of those blessings.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, you make humility look like something we all should strive for, because you've crushed it and in so many ways in life. And it's really cool to get to spend this time with you and to really just to see someone that's built such amazingness in the world and to get to talk about it. So I want to give some background though. So how I know David. So I met David about a year ago, actually. I was invited to this organization called GoBundance to do a keynote on my book, The Core Value Equation. And Chris Ryan he's a CEO. He's CEO.
Yeah, CEO. That's right.
Yeah, he's CEO. So he somehow, you know what it was I got kind of recruited to join, and then somehow I worked my way up to talking to Chris. They asked me to come. I sit next to David. David, you're actually, did you found that with you and a couple
I did. We started that 7 years ago now, 8 years ago.
So I'm sitting next. They had this event called Champions, which is for their higher net worth members. And I do a talk on my book, and it was so cool, man. I'm just sitting there. We're learning about investing, and a lot of people being really vulnerable, a lot of humility in that room. And what was funny is right before that, we have a mutual friend, Justin Donald, and I had dinner with Justin, and Justin's like, I said, yeah, I'm talking at GoBundance. I'm doing a talk there. He said, oh, you're going to meet David? I said, I guess so. And he's like, oh man, like David's a freaking baller. He's like, that guy's, he's like, dude, he's like, that guy kills it at life. And I was like, awesome. Like, I love meeting people that kill it at life. And so, and lo and behold, now the funny part that the audience will know is so this is like October of 2020. So COVID is still in full effect, and doing a live event is totally not like people aren't doing live events quite yet. And this is the first GoBundance big event you guys have done live probably since COVID. I think if I understood that properly. And we get into the room. It's at the Van Zandt Hotel in downtown Austin. And it's like the massive ballroom. And there's like 30 guys, but we're all like 10 feet apart from each other. Sitting.
They said it was the first event they'd had since COVID started. And they had us on these 10-foot tables, each person to one table. They were super cautious, appreciatively so, and it was massive. We were like the giant mega ballroom for 30 guys.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive. So I was lucky though. I sat next to you, and we we got to hang in, and I was like, man, David is really killing it at life. And it's been, and after that I joined Tiger 21. We're in the same Tiger group, and I've gotten to get to know you even better and how you think about things. And I just really think that your entire perspective that we're going to be getting into in just a second here when we really dive into the show it's something that I think all entrepreneurs and business people really need to take a page out of your playbook. So really appreciative to have you here. And I can't wait to talk about just, how you got to where you got to, and really the way you think of life. So dude,
it's great to be with you, Darius. Did I make you did you get some of my Organifi coffee? Did I make you a little latte, like a golden latte?
You made with a turmeric latte.
Yeah. That's right. That's my specialty, man. I brought that in. I was super stoked to share that with everybody.
Yeah, I was like, no, it was delicious. Number one, and it was my first turmeric coffee. So you can take full credit for that.
Nice.
I want to do your official bio. Is that cool if I read it?
Sure. Yeah,
I
let's
always,
do it.
I always like to give our origin stories, but then you guys, David Osborn, he was raised in Europe and educated in Great Britain, selected as a National Merit Scholar. He attended University of Texas and graduated with an economics degree. He's a principal owner of the 8th largest real estate company. I'm going to repeat that, 8th largest real estate company in the entire United States with over 4,500 agents. He's responsible for over 32,000 transaction sides and 10 billion in sales in 2020. He's the author of Tribe of Millionaires, Miracle Morning Millionaires, and Wealth Can't Wait, Baby. I have my own autographed book, and that was a New York Times bestseller amongst the other bestsellers. David, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Darius, it's great to be with you. It's funny, you mentioned earlier, like being a baller at life. And I think most of us that have achieved a certain level of success, and I remember your story, and I was very moved by your story. And I think we're usually trying to figure out something that happened to us earlier in our lives, and we never really figure it out. We're still working on it all the time. So people are like, you're a baller. But in my mind and where I look at the world, I'm still trying to improve like in 42 different areas. Does that make sense? So like, yeah, things are going well and I've had a lot of blessings, but internally I'm usually just more focused on like the little tweaks that I'm trying to manifest in being a better dad or a better husband, or working on my, my long-term business plan, vision, different things. It's just like, it's a never ending journey of little tweaks to improve the overall operation of my experience of life.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, like when, obviously the baller comment was, it's playful, but true, nonetheless true. For me, my perspective of just getting to know you is exactly what you just said, is it's this playing in the game of life and winning in all these different areas that I think when people have maybe a more of a transactional mindset around success, it's really around like money, like how much, who's the CEO of the bigger company and who's got more in the bank account. And I think that although those things do provide opportunities, means, conduit for meeting people, those are, I mean, when I look at the list, I'm like, I think those are relatively smaller parts in the whole scheme of things. And I think at least that's my perspective, especially when I read Wealth Can't Wait.
I think you need to have enough money to not have to work for money. And then once you hit that number, whatever that looks like with your lifestyle, if you keep pursuing money because that's your thing and you want to change the world, God bless you, more power to you. But there's a lot more to this life than just the money in your bank account. And money just gives you the availability of spending time working on that other stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I think is great about money. Yeah.
So do you mind, I'd love for you to give the audience, a little background on yourself, because you're anyone that reads your background is like, well, that's a pretty unorthodox, I guess, adventure to get to where you're at right now, which is, I mean, for, just to kind of give some context, like, David, how many companies do you own? Just out of.
Yeah, it's going to sound silly, but I've started so many, I actually don't know the exact number, but I have at least 50 operating companies that are paying me a check every month. I'm kind of a chaotic entrepreneur, and it's because I have a lot of passions and I sort of chase. My beginning was definitely real estate and Keller Williams, and being the largest Keller Williams franchisee in the country with an amazing partner called Smokey Garrett, who runs the show out of Dallas, Texas. And I'm the chairman of the board, but we're equal partners. That business, I've been doing that for 25 plus years. But along the way, there's been all these offshoots and different things that I've got interested in. Some have failed, but many have succeeded. So today it's like a conglomeration of different businesses. I got a high-tech business. I have a private equity business. I have intellectual property business. I have an entrepreneurial mastermind called GoBundance. And there's just all kinds of little things going on. And my whole philosophy has always been, originally it was to, like I do it, we do it, they do it. So originally it was just to work as hard as I could. Then it was to figure out a team that could run it for me. And then it was ultimately to release control to them and let them run it. And, generally I've had pretty good success in finding people that are better than me at almost everything. So it's good to be low talent, because if you're ambitious and low talent, you have to find a way to be at the level of success you want to be, but through other people, because you can't do it yourself. So that's kind of what that's kind of how I've stumbled my way into a pretty significantly sized amount of capital and cash flow and stuff like that. But yeah, I probably got 50 decent lines of income every month, or every quarter. Like I get checks from about 50 different sources.
I love that. High on ambition and low on talent. I'm like, oh, you sound like me.
Yeah.
It's true.
You're a very talented guy, but you and I do have that one thing. I think we had strong fathers, and I think wasn't somebody at that event talking about the gift of the father? I'd never heard of that before, but there's a tendency for a lot of successful entrepreneurs to have had a fairly aggressive father, I guess is the right term, and different. That shows up in all kinds of permutations. And I had a great father, but he was very disciplined, and he was a Green Beret, and he definitely had his way or the highway kind of approach to life. And I think that kind of creates a seed of drive to, whether it's because you don't want to be in that situation again and you want your freedom, or maybe it's just you pick up some of your dad's fire. There was a certain amount of that got into me at a young age, but all along I just wanted to be financially free. That was my number one goal, and I achieved that. But then all the skills I had was around business and continuing to build financial freedom. So I just kind of kept dabbling in the game. And the other thing I love is what you're doing right here, which is pouring into others. I think, there's a reason. My mom's English. I was raised in Europe, but my dad's American. But there's a reason so many people come here to this country, is because you can make your dreams come true. I know your dad came here because of an unfortunate circumstance in his home country. And, we just need to keep that alive. I mean, the more people that are successful listening to this show or any show or reading my book or your book or any book, the bottom line is this needs to be the land of opportunity for people, where they come and they create the dreams of their lives. And there's not a lot of places like that in the world. So that's, I think we need to keep that alive. And that's what's great about this show and America in general.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love every single thing you just said, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that even amongst the chaos or the divisiveness, and people love, now we have a world of abundant, media with all their opinions trying to get people's attention. The currency of the world is people's attention. The one thing that unites us, I think, is people do fight for happiness and purpose, and they want to have a better life for their families. And to your point, in the United States is, for all its flaws, there's no place in the world you come to and really build yourself up from nothing, and no one will get in your way. The world except yourself potentially. And so I couldn't agree with you more, man. And I always hear people talk about the genetic lottery ticket,
Mm-hmm.
and I think to be born in this country, or to be able to come to this country at a young age. You were born in UK, or you're born here?
I was born in America at 18, but I left at 18 months. I was raised in Europe till I was 14. So I didn't set foot back in America until I was 14. So I don't know what that's like. It's kind of hard to describe. I'm an American that was raised overseas. So I didn't feel American. I had an English accent when I first got here.
Wait, you came here at 18?
14.
Oh, 14. Oh, yeah, that's right. You went to school here in Austin. Yeah. So I didn't realize we had that in common. So I was born here and then left here at 12 months, and then came back at 18 months. But so I was raised here, but I left briefly.
Was your mom American?
Oh yeah. My mom's from Western Pennsylvania, steel mill town.
Okay.
So full Italian, like straight up, like
nice,
like gravy Sunday. Yeah, no. I grew up probably culturally Italian American more than anything, but I'm half Persian.
So yeah, there's a lot of commonalities, because then you're like, yes, I'm American heritage, but I grew up overseas, so I have a massive appreciation for the opportunity we have here.
Yeah, it's incredible. I want to talk about that. Obviously you're super entrepreneurial and ambitious. When is the first time you realized, I'm going to go pave my own way. I'm going to go clear my own path?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm in England, somewhat. My great uncle, so I was kind of getting the eggs out from under the chickens and doing some hay baling and stuff. Not in that extreme way that a farmer from Nebraska would, but when we were off, we often were working. So there was a lot of work to be done. And then I came over here and I worked. My first job was sacking groceries, and I did that because my buddy was a grocery sacker, and I just tried to be the fastest grocery sacker in the store. But I also acted like I owned the place, and I got fired for insolence from that job. And so then then I went into construction, where I just worked my tail off too. I always just noticed I was willing to work hard, not at schoolwork, funnily enough. I was a C student in school, but even when I worked landscape architecture outside, and I was digging a ditch, like the second year on this job, the second summer. And I remember one of the veterans looked over, he goes, "You still haven't learned." And what he was implying is I was still digging too hard. I was just going too fast in the sun to be smart. So, but that was just me. So then I started a lawn mowing company. I made 20 grand when I was 17 years old, living at my house. And that's big money. That's 20 grand cash. In 1980 something, it was probably worth 40 grand today. I was the richest I ever felt, probably. So I just saw early on that I didn't fit in people's boxes. I wasn't I wasn't a very good employee. I had a bit of an ownership mentality early. I just always felt like there was something in me driven in that space to find the quickest way to improve whatever I was doing and around me, and then also eventually to create financial freedom. Now, my lucky break was Keller Williams, but all along, and if you looked at all my work efforts, I was always working really hard, which is incredible because I was a 2.2 GPA to get out of college. I just didn't care about schoolwork at all.
Yeah, well, what's funny is we have so much in common. I mean, I was same, like always super hard worker, great work ethic. I was bored with school, and I actually tried dropping out when I was 20, and my mom was like, you need something to fall back on. I'm like, but I'm going to work for myself. What do I need a degree for? Like there's no no one's taking my resume and hiring me for it. And my grades weren't that good. What the one thing I will say is I went to India when I was 20. I went to I stayed in a delete village, which is the Untouchables. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Yeah, a little bit. I know they got a pretty strong caste system over there for sure.
It's the bottom of the caste, right?
Yeah.
So it's the lowest caste. And I went to a delete orphanage, and I went to a delete village, and I was 20, and I really had I think I had like 2.7 GPA or something. And literally I would show up the last day of class and cram for the final, and I felt shame when I left that experience.
Wow.
And the shame I felt was I have been given the privilege of education and opportunity, and I'm totally just like slapping it in the face by not trying. And then I changed. I got straight A's after that because I was like, I'm going to at least try hard if I'm going to do it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I got that lesson a little bit later. I didn't really understand how privileged I was. I was just kind of a rebel without a clue. I was a little angry with the world. My high school years were pretty bumpy. I got thrown out of 3 high schools just for insolence. I had this I couldn't shut my mouth. I wasn't really afraid of any adults except my father. That was the only human I was really afraid of. And I was just dumb enough to keep talking when I shouldn't and keep speaking back when I shouldn't. So yeah, I came from a pretty bumpy road, and then I got on the highway of life. Now I've smoothed it out. So, when I've just spent a lot of time smoothing out my rougher edges. And when I'm in a country club setting now, because I love golf with my family, I'm always I feel like I kind of have to hold my reins and my horse back because there's something pretty aggressive inside of me, but it's mellowing, which is good. And then I realized the privilege thing when I started doing some charitable work. And, I hitchhiked through India too. And I came away from there with gratitude. And I think I've had massive gratitude for the opportunities we have in America and how difficult it is in most of the world, like unfathomably difficult.
Oh, so bad.
But then it took me a while to realize how privileged I was even in America. As tough as my dad was, he wanted me to be educated. He was committed to my education. In fact, the only time I ever saw him cry was when I got thrown out of that 3rd high school. He was enraged, super disciplined, and then just cried. I'm like, wow, that actually got my attention more than almost anything. I was like, oh, maybe I should kind of suck it up a little bit here. But
you really care.
I saw gratitude because I saw the slums in India. I was 7 weeks in India. I was like, oh my gosh, these people are born with zero chance, almost crazy. Zero chance.
It's crazy.
And then it took me a long time to realize in America, there's that too, right? Yeah. There's a whole class of people here that are born without opportunity. And a friend of mine who did jail time for killing a guy, Will Little, his 13 years old, his stepdad puts a gun in his face and says, get out of the house or I'll kill you. That's hard, right? That's a lot different than my background and what I had to deal with. So now I understand the nuances much better, but I still think it's very important we try to protect as wide a range of opportunity and possibility in this country as possible, because the more you hammer that down and you take that away, the less freedom exists in the world. So I'm much more educated though and aware today than I ever have been.
There's a book, I think it's called A Tale of Two Countries. I was at the TED conference about 6 years ago, and it's a TED talk too, not TEDx, the actual TED.
I'm writing it down right now. A Tale of Two Countries.
A Tale of Two Countries. I believe that's what it's called. And it's this writer from, I think he's from UPenn or something, and he essentially writes about the two, because a lot of times you hear people say, well, in this country, people come here from third world countries and they make it. Why can't our own citizens make it? Right. And they use the example of kind of like what you're talking about, these people born into poverty in the United States, no education,
right,
abuse, violence, and then you have these folks. And the example they use in this talk is a guy that came here, I think, from Pakistan, and he gets shot in the face by somebody, and he ends up making amends with the guy that shoots him with the shot. He shot him with it was a shotgun, but it was not the kind. It was like a spray, like for bird shot.
right.
So, and he ended up losing his job. And anyway, it's this whole story about these two classes within the lower class in the United States. And I think that, like, the way I'm kind of been thinking about it and been getting more interested is, how do you bridge that gap? And I was talking, Javon McCormick?
Not ringing a bell, but keep going.
He's the CEO of Scribe, Tucker Max's company. And so he and I were talking about this where,
oh yeah, I've met him.
Yeah, great guy, like an amazing guy. And he was on the show, and he and I were talking about it. I said, there's all these kids where they wake up the day they were born in this country, like they have 51 out of 52 cards stacked against them.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, when I started looking at, as entrepreneurs or CEOs or business folks or anyone for that matter, if you really want to go make a difference, it's like, how do you unstack that deck? Because, I think that's where we start to look at the America that we live in and say, listen, below that, we do have the infrastructure. We do have the ability to create a better country. And I think entrepreneurship is the answer to that. And there's a woman by the name of Kat Hoke, and she has an organization that's called Hustle 2.0. And she had another company called Defy Ventures, and I'm blanking on the name of her book, but it was a New York Times bestseller. And I saw her speak. And what she did, she went to Brownsville Penitentiary down in Texas, and they started this program where they were basically teaching these guys entrepreneurism, these like hardcore felons. And the recidivism rate for these guys when they came out of jail went from like 73%. It's a really high number. Like if you have a felony for like a serious felony, the recidivism rate's like, the chance of you going back to jail is like 7 or 8 out of 10 chances, right?
Wow.
And it dropped to 7% from people that graduated her program.
Wow.
And the answer was this. It was really amazing, which kind of thing speaks to what you're talking about. But she's like, look, these guys are like, if you look at some of these guys who are street hustlers, who are running like 100-person crack dealerships,
they're entrepreneurs.
They're hardcore entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
They got HR, they got accounting, they got distribution, they got all that stuff. They're just selling the wrong product.
Yep.
Right. So I really do. And she's doing some amazing things. It might be a really cool thing for you guys to do with GoBundance. You could bring a bunch of people into the penitentiary to mentor these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what's really great about America too, is you meet so many amazing people up to so many great things. And you just got to get behind them. I know that when I hit my number, because I hit my number about 4 years ago, the number that I wanted to hit for financial freedom in my mind. And I remember I was kind of depressed for about 6 or 8 months because I thought, like John or Paul or whatever on the way to Damascus, some light was going to shine through the heavens. I'd be blind and I'd realize I want to put shoes on the shoeless's feet, or I want to put glasses on the people that can't see. And nothing came to me. And I was kind of depressed that nothing kind of rolled into view as the next great mountain to climb. And then I bumped into a guy, Alan Graham, who does great work with Community First there in Austin and tries to put the homeless in homes with dignity and tiny homes. And he does amazing work. And he just said to me one time when I was telling him the same story, he goes, all of us out here running these charities really need money. Yeah. So if you just keep doing what you do and make money and write us checks, that is a huge need. And that's when it kind of clicked back into place for me. For now, it could still change. And so I love writing checks to these people and, supporting them in all their endeavors. There's some amazing people up to some incredible stuff. And that's really the solution, is people like your friend, Kat Hoke and Javon. It's, that the sad thing is government doesn't seem to help that much. I don't know if you've noticed that. I mean, there's definitely a role for government, but if government could actually do it, I'd be like, hey, let's have 99% taxes or 85% taxes. But the reality is, the sad thing is, no matter how well-intentioned government is, they put all their efforts into stuff and it almost seems to make it, I wouldn't say worse, but it doesn't certainly heal it, right? So it doesn't take it to the next level. It might make being poor more tolerable, which is great, like with food stamps or housing. But without that educational piece, that entrepreneurial piece, somebody actually showing people a new way of being. And it has to be, most of the folks in these spaces have to be shown by somebody who's been there. Yeah. I can't parachute in and be, hey, you should do this and that, because I don't have their experience. I was the middle of the middle class. I could probably help somebody that had, a soldier's father who was super aggressive, but I can't help a guy from the inner city. And that's how I related to Will when I talked to him. Is he got in a gang fight and shot a guy. Well, I got into a few fights too, but we didn't have guns, so nobody got killed. There might have been a few broken bottles and that was it. But there's no question in my mind that if that situation had occurred and they'd been shooting at me and I'd happen to have a gun, I'd have shot back. Does that make sense? Like, I think that's very natural. He just happened to hit somebody. And so then he goes to jail for a long time for that, but put in a situation where if I'd lived his life, and that leads to one of my greatest ahas of life, Darius. I was watching this movie the other day, and it was all these characters in the movie weren't really, in this particular movie, weren't trying to harm each other. They just all had different perspectives of information, and they didn't know what the other person knew. And if you'd been any person in that movie, and it wasn't a great movie, and you're going to ask me the name, and I can't even remember the name, but the aha I had was, if you were any of the characters in this stupid movie I was watching, you would have been doing the same thing. They were all acting correctly from their point of view, but they were all clashing because the stories weren't aligned. And I think that's what's going on a lot of times in life, is if you lived someone else's life and you saw their story, you would probably behave in a similar manner.
Yeah.
And so, that means that we just have to keep adding enlightenment and then backing the people that can reach the constituents that we're trying to help, which fortunately there's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of great work.
Yeah. I love everything you just said. It just reminded me of a mentor of mine, ran Stagen, who runs Stagen Leadership Institute in Dallas. And his whole thing is great leaders meet people where they're at, and I think what you're talking, at least what I just picked up from what you put down, is this is about empathy and grace, and granting people the grace. And I think that those are the things that great leaders need to start to develop. And and some are doing a great job at it, and government's probably the worst example of it. But one of the things he says, we live in a world of level 5 problems and level 3 leaders.
Yeah.
He's using Jim Collins language. And when I look at that, I go, I'm really hopeful of the leveling up of leadership. And I think I was talking to somebody about this, and they're like, I'd love to get your perspective on this. They said, when the people were in the dark ages, they didn't call it the dark ages, but when they got to the Renaissance, they did.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like right now, like we're at this, there's a lot of pain out there. And I actually really believe entrepreneurship is the answer to this. And that the pain is, like, we're in the dark ages and we're about to hit the Renaissance, right? And we're going to say, oh, those were the dark ages, and this is this great period of enlightenment. What are your thoughts around that?
I read a great book. I think it was called Swerve, but it was about the fact that the Renaissance only could occur because in Italy at that time, you had these city states, and a lot of them had been like banking, and the Florentine was actually the most true form of currency. So they hadn't debased their currency, and it became very strong. And because of that strength of currency, they were literally able to stand up, to the church for the first time ever and say, hey, wait a second, there's another way you can look at this. There's like scientific discovery, and there's artistic perspectives, and that maybe the earth isn't the center of the universe, and all these different things. But it was because of the strength of the economy, if you will, and the currency of the Florentine, and the Renaissance in general, it was birthed in Italy, that those truths were able to come out. So tying that back to entrepreneurialism, entrepreneurialism could be the greatest force for change in the universe. I mean, you may want to have electric cars, but until a guy like Elon Musk comes along and says, hey, I'm going all out for electric cars, when everyone, including me back at the time, thought he was insane. Who starts a car company, in the middle of, and now he's changed the language from when are we going to have electric cars to how long are we going to keep having gas guzzling cars? Now there's all kinds of different permutations in that. And, I'm not going to get lost in a global warming conversation here, but entrepreneurs can really change the world. And then when you see people that have built businesses and then go back and try to help, whatever circumstance they came from, it's even more potent and more powerful. So, I'm of course on your side on that. I think all great change and all great breakthrough comes from really self-interested people in the private sector that have an itch or a bug or a problem they're trying to solve. And they're usually trying to solve two things: an internal complexity that they have, and then they're trying to play that out by solving a problem in the outside world.
Yeah. And
most of them I know have huge compassion and big hearts. But you also have to have like a safety net and all these different things. But I'm with you on that. I mean, entrepreneurialism is the only way I think that you have transformation.
So I want to go back to, you started working with Keller Williams, and like when you did that, obviously that was a job, right? And I think prior to that, I think you were selling like
sold computers door to door.
Right.
Then I sold all my possessions and hitchhiked around the world for 2 years. And then I came back and got into
that's
real
amazing.
estate.
That's amazing. Yeah. So you hitchhike around the world. You're selling computers before that. You come back. You get it. Your mom was working with Keller Williams. Is that correct?
Yeah, my mom's an agent. Keller had 5 agents when she joined. So my dad retired the Army. She went into real estate to make a couple extra bucks, and then she's like, "Why don't you come work with me in real estate?" I said, "I'm never going to go into real estate. But I do have credit card debt. I just hitchhiked around the world. I ran up my credit card. I'm at negative $1,500 net worth. So I'll come work with you temporarily while I look for a real job." That's what I told her. I wanted to go into Wall Street or something. I wanted to be a finance guy or start some business. And then I got into real estate. I sold a guy a house that was a buddy of mine from college. We drove around 3 weekends looking at houses, drank beer after looking at houses, and then he bought a house. I made $7,500. I was like, "Oh, this is a pretty good job. Maybe I like this job."
What year was this?
This was 1994.
Yeah. So how did that first $7,500 check taste?
Oh man, it was great. I'd been poor for a long time at that point. Like when I hitchhiked around the world, I lived on $10 a day. So
wow.
Sorry, $20 a day. So I had $7,000. I spent $7,000 per year for 2 years.
Wow, that's
which, by the way, made me in the top. In some of the countries I was in, that might have put me in the top 5%. But for an American, it wasn't that much. So yeah, I was ready. And then I got a taste for making money. And that another thing that went on for me then is in sales, you get a lot of sales training. That was my first full exposure to sales training. And Gary Keller is a great teacher. And I learned there, wow, if I learned this little script or this little way to approach this business or this way to prospect, my results would just leapfrog forward. Unlike school where you don't know why you're learning calculus. You don't know why you're learning philosophy. There's no immediate impact on your life. But suddenly in business, there was this immediate increase in my income as soon as I learned something new. And then I take that next level and I start opening franchises, and the same thing was true. Gary Keller was a huge teacher. So I would learn, if you learn how to hire just a little bit better, if you learn how to put a system in place just a little bit better, you immediately, almost within months, you make more money. And then from that point forward, 1994, I'm 27 years old. I become like a learning junkie. Then I become a straight A student. And ever since then, and to this day, I'm reading 40 books a year. I'm taking notes. I'm taking classes. I'm spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on education, probably, certainly $100,000 a year on education, nonstop. Just like now I get it. Like, give me more information. How can I live longer? How can I contribute more? How can I have the greatest adventures? How can I be the best father, the best husband? I'm constantly engaged in being coached and learning on a continuous basis, because what you begin to realize is how little you know. But anyway, going back to that beginning. So I sold for 3 years. I made some good money, but Keller Williams was eager to grow back then, and they wanted franchise owners. And I didn't want to keep selling real estate after 3 years. I wanted to go do something more. So I bought some franchises in North Texas, New Mexico. Still wasn't very wealthy at that time, but I was now probably 35, 40 grand net worth. I bought my first property, which I turned into a rental property after living in it for 2 years because I didn't want to mow the yard anymore. I'd had enough with that, and went up to North Texas, New Mexico, and my mom and I together started opening real estate companies up there. And same thing, we had, we still didn't have any money. We just the middle class. My dad was a soldier. If you've ever been in the military, they take care of you, but you don't make any real money. And then we started opening these franchises, and after tons of failure and learning opportunities, we built the largest group of franchises in the company.
So when you were doing that, you were really just investing in yourself. And was in your mind, was that unbridled ambition was what kicked in? Or was it like, I'm gonna build the biggest this, or like?
No. It was much more, I think it's Pivot, that book Pivot by the guy from LinkedIn was so good, I thought, but it was just like constant pivoting. Like I remember I was just hoping to make a couple $100,000 a year from the first franchise I owned. Like maybe one day, if I work really hard, I can get this thing to make me $200,000 a year. Now that one makes $800,000 a year, and I've got 14 of them. So,
wow.
There was no like strategy. There was just like doing everything I could with what was in front of me. One element of my character that was useful is that I was aggressive. So a lot of guys that I started with back then, they bought one franchise or two franchises. I bought as many as I could. In fact, at one point I wanted to own 100. That was all the way until the crash of 06. So like maybe it's good that I didn't have 100 on the ground in 06. But I was just always looking for expansion and for more. And I've been that way even to this day, even though now my focus is on my family and being a dad and being a husband. I still have a fairly expansionist viewpoint of the universe.
So when 06 the crash happened, I lived in California at the time. We've talked a little bit about this. I was running a subprime mortgage lender. We blew up in 07. That's when the market crashed, and California got hit pretty hard. I know Austin probably got hit less hard, but other parts of the country that you're probably in probably did get hit pretty hard. How many franchises did you own, like when the market crashed?
I was at 15 then, and now I'm at 14. So I'll give you an example. So when it hit, now again, I was a super learning based individual along the way. So I had paid attention to what people said. And one of them was that you should never take personal guarantees. So I only had like 15% of my stuff had personal guarantees on it. So the economy crashed, and we had losing offices. We had some still making some money. Basically, we went down about 70% in revenue, and we never went to negative profitability, but some of my franchises just died. The further out ones, the expansionists, when you were on the edges of the suburbs, they just died. They no revenue and all the expenses.
Right.
And I remember I had one office where my rent was, $9,000 a month, and we weren't paying it because we couldn't. There was no personal guarantee. It was just a corporate, it's a relationship between 5 partners that happen to own a franchise. I had partners in every franchise, and this the landlord, and I paid him what I could. I paid him 50% of the profits if I made any. So every month I was negative. I didn't pay him anything, and if I made $2,000, I'd pay him $1,000. And that was just me deciding what to do. And I remember he kept threatening me, like, I'm going to lock you out. I'm like, dude, do me a favor. Lock me out.
Yeah, please.
I'm losing. I'm writing checks here, man. I'm losing 50 to 100 grand a year on this business. I'm robbing my good shops to feed my bad shops. I'm really just trying to keep my people employed and see what happens. And you'd be doing me a favor if you'd lock the doors. But it was painful. It was a scary time. And that was kind of 06, 07, 08. That we had just expanded to 4. We opened 4 offices, the most we'd ever opened in 06. So we were just kind of rising up. Yeah. I was a little nervous though. I remember thinking, because I had a finger on the pulse of it. I was like, man, this just doesn't seem right. Like, I'd get in. I remember getting in a taxi in Vegas, and the taxi driver was like, yeah, I just bought 3 condos in that new tower. I'd like, what's that tower? He'd be like, oh, that's the MGM whatever. I'm like, he goes, I just bought 3 condos there. I'm like, you did? Yeah. He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, how'd you qualify for that? They didn't ask. Yeah. I'm like, oh. So I was being somewhat cautious. The one thing I had done prudently was I built a cash reserve for 2 reasons. One, I was so busy. I remember I had $4 million in cash that, right then. And it's because I was too busy, but B, I was just a little nervous. Like I couldn't even bring myself to buy, a house for me to live in because I felt everything felt really hot, to me. But I was opening offices and putting money into that. But in each case, I would negotiate like hell to get the personal guarantee off the offices. So again, a lesson I've learned that paid off really well, because when the landlords start to get iffy with me, I'd be like, I'd just say the same thing, man. Like, I don't owe you this. This is a corporate LLC that owes you this. And if you want to shut me down and I'm losing money, you're actually just doing me a favor. So they were all pretty cooperative with me. Funnily enough, the one that I had a personal guarantee on that did fail, they never contacted me again. That was the strangest thing. There was one office that failed and I personally guaranteed it. So I just locked the doors because it was a disaster, and I never heard from them again, which is the strangest thing. That's a mystery of life, but I think it was a very, very wealthy family and they just moved on. So anyway, that was a scary time, but then 08, 09, it's kind of stabilized and I'm sitting on this liquidity and I've had to write some checks and stuff like that. And then I started looking around and buying some stuff in 9 and 10. And then by 11, I was pretty certain it was the greatest buying opportunity of all time. And so I went in with everything I could. I started teaching my agents now may be the best time in your life to buy real estate. I had a whole class that I taught. I got about 30 or 40 that listened to me out of 4,000 that come up to me every now and then and just thank me. They're so happy because they bought a bunch of real estate back then. And we ended up buying close to 1,000 single family homes just with my family office, distressed debt. And then when the market V'd back up, and it came back, both my old real estate residential businesses and now my new kind of private equity distressed debt single family rental business came back. Then my life changed, Darius. It's only around 2013 I realized, wow, I've kind of hit a number that is pretty significant here, and probably, touch wood, it'd be pretty hard to blow it in this lifetime. And then the world looks a little different. It gets kind of easier.
So wow. So it's funny. 06 is when I doubled down on my first business, and I signed a $30,000 a month, 17,000 square foot lease, no PG, but I was in San Francisco. And so when the world imploded, they're like, we don't care. They're like, because there are all these tech companies around, right?
Right.
So they wouldn't negotiate with me. I had to bail on my lease, and then that eventually actually forced me to shut down my company.
So you did or didn't have a PG?
I did not as well. I did what you did. I had a standby letter of credit for like, I don't know, 80 grand or something I got in place of a PG, and they just hit that, and I paid that 80 grand, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. That's the other thing I'd negotiate sometimes. If they wouldn't let me off the PG, I'd have a declining PG. So it'd be like first year, 100% of the lease, second year, 80%, 60. I try to get it to disappear after 3, but it's certainly after 5, it would disappear or just go down every year.
Yeah.
So your whack is less. But anyway, yeah, it was a scary time, dude. That was a crazy, I've talked about that. I know. And it was harder for you. The mortgage business absolutely blew up. I mean, it was
I was I was all refis. I was 100% refi business, and it was all subprime. I was literally the eye of the storm, and then I just couldn't get out of my own way. But I learned a lot then. People always say, I bet you wouldn't change anything. I'm like, no, I'd change all of it. I wouldn't do any of that. I wouldn't put myself through that again. I was too hard on myself. But I want to go. So what do you mind throwing, like, can we talk net worth numbers back then?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. You feel comfortable with that? If not, it's okay.
I think when I felt like I was wealthy, it was like 40. I was at 13. I was probably at about 40. And then I was like, wow, this is a lot of money.
Where were you at before? I mean, first of all, let me just say this. For those of you that don't know housing market, literally saying this, the buyout, you literally couldn't have been more right with that call. 2011 literally was the bottom.
It was the bottom. Yeah.
So like it did not go an inch below that bottom. And
no, that was the perfect time.
Only up from that. That's such great timing and you had such market insight because you're watching.
But I was still scared. Your original question was, did I have this grand plan? And what I'm trying to say is, like, I worked my tail off. I always had a vision of doing more, but it was not like my original vision was to own 100 franchises and be the largest residential real estate company in the world. And then 06 happened. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really tough. Then I started buying these distressed assets. I was like, oh, it's really good to own distressed, real estate. So there was no grand plan. There was just a lot of hustle and a lot of awareness and a lot of constantly shifting the vision, pivoting, if you will, to what showed up in my life. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And I think that kind of speaks to where I've seen a lot. Like I've now had the honor of having a lot of friends that have done well, and it speaks to that grit and that, like, pivoting and moving with the market and being flexible and believing in themselves and trusting themselves even when things aren't going their way. So obviously you did that well.
Yeah. And I'll tell you another story, and it's going to sound weird. That's why it's strange to talk about net worth, but so I made 3.6 million in 06, right? That was the peak. So I was making a bunch of money. That's to me, after all my partners got paid.
That's awesome.
And then, like, at the bottom of 08, I was down into the 6 figures, and your friends, your listeners are like, well, that sounds really tough.
Oh, poor David.
But my overhead was $700,000 a month. Like, so now it's like way more than that. It's several million a month. But at that time it was $700,000 a month. And I'm looking at everything like, this is really bad. My income's going down 60% a year, but my fixed overhead, it came down some because some of it's taxes and bonuses, but there's a chunk of that that's got to be paid no matter what. And we were writing checks to, we shuttered the ones that were hopeless, but we tried to keep a lot of them going. So we're taking checks from here to fund the ones that are doing badly. And so that'll give you an example. I mean, I was just lucky enough. The model we ran was efficient and it was lean. And the biggest 2 expenses I had were taxes and bonuses to my employees. We've always played a low base and a super high bonus. So that's a lesson I also learned that I still to this day try to follow. So from the outside, everyone would have said, oh my gosh, you're still in the top 1% of earners in the country. You shouldn't be stressed. But from inside the cockpit, the wings were on fire. The engine was sputtering out and the overhead was just fixed. Like, that was it. There was $700,000 a month that had to be spent no matter what. But we pulled out of it. So I don't remember the net worth numbers at 06 to 08. At that time, I was just in it. Like, I didn't really come out and look at it from above that much and see where everything was. I'd gone back and tracked it and kind of created a rough chart, which I know you've probably seen, but I just can't remember.
Yeah, no worries. So you're actually touching on we got about 9 minutes, and I know you got to run. So, but I want to go into this because you touched on something that I think fascinated me about the book, in your book, Wealth Can't Wait. We've talked a lot about this offline, but this idea of your passive income covering your fixed overhead. And I know that you weren't talking about that with your business, but you've now applied this and you call it being 100%er.
Yeah.
Right? Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Sure. So this is the idea we teach everyone in GoBundance, which is, and again, we're just scrappy entrepreneurs. We're not the guy. If you're going to invent the next iPad or be the next Elon Musk, then you shouldn't listen to me at all. But if you're a scrappy guy, maybe a C student, and you just want to be financially free, the way we try to teach people is you should invest in passive income vehicles. We call it horizontal because you can have a bunch of them in a row. So it's like a horizontal line of income streams. And you should be trying to think, how can I cover my monthly overhead with income streams from investments I made? For instance, there are some pipeline investments you can make in oil and gas, which oil and gas is depressed right now. So I think it's a reasonably safe bet that'll dividend out 8%. So let's say you put 100 grand in that and you're making 8%. That's 8,000. Now let's say you spend 8,000 a month to live, which is pretty low by some standards, pretty high by some standards. But let's just throw all that judgment aside and say, let's say this human being we're referring to lives on 8 grand a month. So that's 96,000 years their overhead. If they had 100 grand and they put it in that 8% yielding dividend stock, they've covered 1 month of their life. And if you can fill out all 12 of those months, right? If you can cover all of your overhead with passive income, you're then financially free and you can be nothing but creative. You could quit right then and go surf forever in Guatemala, or maybe there's no water in Nicaragua, I think is where I'm in. Or you could like keep working and keep building. But until you get to that point, and people are, we love real estate for this. Real estate does feel like watching paint compared to like investing in Apple or something like that. But, I've seen the stock market go way up and I've seen it go way down. I've seen it crash and crater. Real estate's pretty steady. We had the big crash in 2006, but it was really a lender-led. It was your fault, Darius. It was a lender.
I take full blame.
But if you own real estate, over time, it's like this snowball. It just builds and accumulates over time. So we just encourage people to become 100%er. So if you had 20% of your annual budget met by horizontal income, you'd be a 20%er. And it's just a change in mindset when people come into our tribe and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm making $1 million a year, but I'm a 0%er. Yeah. Like I got a guy who came in that was $1 million a year with zero passive income. Today he's at 500,000. It's been 8 years in passive income. And he's, he lives on 360. So he's 125%er. Because it just shifted his mindset. Now he's an extremely aggressive human. So he immediately took all his money and started buying multifamily. So he's done extraordinarily well. But it shifts your mindset because you'll have doctors out there making $3 million a year, but spending $3 million and they're stressed and they're on the gerbil wheel and they may not admit it to themselves. You take that same doctor and say their overhead's $1 million a year. Now they're making $1 million a year from their real estate and they're still making their $3 million a year. Now life looks totally different. And that's what we try to teach people is how to take that super pressure off so you can find a way to contribute your gifts to the world, whether it's surfing in Nicaragua or feeding the world or changing the inner cities. And there's so much work to be done. When
did you become 100%er?
Yeah, I was pretty frugal as a young man. I'm not now, but I was pretty frugal as a young man. So I probably hit it when I was in my early 30s. But Darius, I was so ambitious back then, I didn't notice it. Like a lot of what happened to me, I just didn't notice. I didn't stop to add it up back then. I just drove forward as hard as I could. And I'd say I hit it probably mid 30s, maybe.
Yeah, it's such a game changer. I never had that perspective. I started thinking about it probably like 4 or 5 years ago. I'm like, man, I don't have a lot of passive income. I was probably a 10 or 15%er. And I kind of like the guy you were just describing, really good income. I had all my assets tied up in my business and I had like one rental property. Right. And then I wanted to leave that. I left my company. Right. But it was pre-exit. I didn't want to run the business anymore and I lost my income and it fucking freaked me out, Mm-hmm. Now, I will say this, I'm going to give you some credit right now I'm 100%er right now. And
that's awesome. Yeah. I saw your plan you put together in Tiger. It was amazing. You were just so thoughtful when you put your mind to something, you just really grind it out. So yeah, congratulations, dude. It changes everything, doesn't it? When you're 100%er.
Yeah, it's I'm still like not super comfortable with it because it's new, but it is like, it's different, right? It's like, oh wow, like I'm going to focus on what I want to focus on. The other thing that I want to, I know we have about 3 minutes here. I just want to bring up one last thing that really, man, was a game changer for me. I read your book, Wealth Can't Wait. And it was this thing around negative self-talk. and these conversations, oh, I can't do that, or like, you know, like if I do that, something negative is going to happen, and really flipping that on its head. Those are like the two things from Wealth Can't Wait that I was like, these are mind blowers.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean,
and like changing, like literally stopping yourself and saying, I'm going to say the opposite of this to myself
right
right now.
No
And
negative self-talk is super important. I mean, we just get so many, you know, in the movie, The Beautiful Minds, you know, there's that guy and he's crazy, right? And he sees these three people that aren't imaginary. If you remember the Beautiful Minds movie with,
Russell
Crowe. Thanks. Yeah, that great actor. So, so in that movie, he's psycho, whatever the word is, where you see people, and he sees these people and he lives this crazy life. I think we all have that a little bit. We have these negative Nellies in our brains that just tell us negative stuff all the time. And you can't do that. Why'd you do that? You're an idiot. What a fool, you know, and it's only you, because no one else really notices. You might do something stupid, but everyone else just kind of moves on, and you're stuck on like, why did you say that? Why did you blow that? Why did you do that stupid real estate deal? Whatever. And my philosophy is you just you can never make it go completely away. You just turn the volume down on the negative stuff and you turn up the volume on the positive stuff. So you can override a negative with a positive by saying the opposite to yourself. And then the other thing is you just kind of dismiss and ignore that. Oh yeah, hey, how are you? And in the end of the movie, A Beautiful Mind, he's actually walking in to get an award. I think they gave him the Nobel Prize for economics or something for some concept he came up with. And you see the three, you know, pieces of his mind that are psychotic, that they go, hey, oh, and he just walks by and ignores them. And what he's learned to do is manage his psychosis by walking past the negatives. And I think that's something that I've spent a lot of time on too, is just turning down the volume of the negative things and turning up the volume of the positive things. The negative things never go away. I don't think there's a single person out there that doesn't sometimes beat themselves up, but you just turn the volume way down. And you're like, oh yeah, there you are. I see you. I'm not going to pay attention to you, though. I'm not going to feed you. I'm going to feed the positive.
Yeah, my therapist says I do somatic experience therapy, and he says when you start fighting back with your negative ego is when you know you're healing trauma.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yes, he's like, that's when you know you're like at the tail end of like healing traumatic experiences, or a lot of that negative self-talk is just trauma trapped in you, and it's finding its way through your ego. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
We all have so much trauma, man. I think that's, a friend of mine said recently, he thought the number one problem the world has is trauma.
Yeah.
Whether it's the black light, you know, it's whether it's a criminal getting, you know, or a cop beating up on a guy that he shouldn't be, it's all trauma. Both sides have trauma, right? It's just, we all have trauma to different degrees. So if we could spend our life focusing on how to heal trauma, maybe we could make a dent in the negativity of the world.
Oh man. Beautiful way to end the show. I swear to God, if you'll do it, I want to have one more show with you.
Okay.
I know it's been tough. I want to talk about, you have an amazing system for achieving goals and the way you do it, and I really want to share that with the audience. Do you mind if I hit up your people and try to get another show on the board?
I'd love to do it, Darius. It's great to be with you. And like I said, I'm at a point where anything we can do together to make a difference in the world, sign me up. You know, let's try to make this world a better place.
Brother, so much gratitude. I really thank you. This was so great. I can't wait for our next conversation. And man, thank you so much again.
Thanks, Darius. Great to be with you, my friend.
All right. Peace out, everybody. We'll talk to you guys soon. See you.